Okay, so the topic for right now is going to be human morphology and the Graypill perspective on that. Well, the Graypill perspective is that we should look at ourselves internally and externally to determine our nature. So basically everything is clear about how we should function just by looking at the structure, looking at our structure. So, for example, there are going to be very big indicators for important functions, and I have some that I wanted to talk about right now. For example, our feet have the most bones compared to any body part. So, why is this important? Well, we're bipeds. Like, we walk on our feet, and we don't walk on all fours, or we don't rely on our arms for transportation. So what does that mean? Well, it means that lots of things are going to be very different. Our rib cage will be less deep. Our hips will be less narrow. In fact, they're going to be wider. Things like that. And it's also going to mean that our feet have the most bones, which is why we should prioritize the health of our feet. And we need to prioritize their function. But what completely limits their function? Shoes. I mean, we wear massive rubber soles under our feet, and they basically take away the ability for them to work correctly. And what that has systematic effects. It has like a chain of effects going up our entire body, and that's not good. And definitely a blue pill that we should get rid of, because that shoes are good for you, right? Or at least, like, even arch support is good. Like, that's terrible for you, and your entire body needs to work on its own. You be functioning on its own, not having any sort of supplementary protection. Another thing is the Achilles tendon, largest tendon in the entire body. That's right behind your ankle. It goes up your calf. Another thing, I mean, that's also good correlated to your soleus, which is also extremely important. I'll talk about that for another time. Some other things are the tongue is the strongest, one of the strongest muscles. Another thing is how our body, how our extensor muscles are all connected, when our flexor muscles are all connected. This is extremely important for the function of our body, and it's also important why these functions the muscles shouldn't work in isolation. They should work together, and if they're working in isolation, that's just bad. And it's also why I don't recommend hypertrophy, which is like bodybuilding, or just working on certain specific contractile tissues in one given moment, a single contractile tissue. So like working only a bicep by doing a bicep curl at that one moment. I just don't think that's, I mean, there's nothing, I guess I could say there's no harm. It's not going to do any massive harm, but it's working a single flexor muscle in isolation. And I mean, that there's nothing wrong in terms of like blood flow. I mean, it's not going to do any harm in that case. But most of the time, when we work a certain muscle in isolation, we make it stronger than the smaller muscles that we tend to not recognize. I mean, most people don't even recognize that there are extremely small muscles that stabilize and maintain proper function in the chain, and it's almost impossible to isolate those in themselves, because they work in the chain. They work best in the chain. So, and I'll definitely talk about more examples of how you can work all of the muscles in a single chain, or at least make sure that the chain is correctly being, you can make sure it's correctly functioning, so that you don't have to worry about deteriorating. So why is the tongue important? Why is it so strong? Well, it's connected to your neck, and the muscles are when you activate your tongue muscle, you activate the hyoid, and your neck flexors are going to get involved, and then the entire musculature down your spine will get involved as well. They all get activated when you activate your tongue. That's what I meant to say. And these muscles are necessary for protecting your head. They prevent less damage by having these muscles active. You can prevent less damage when you get punched, or like even if immense forces are applied to your body in a car crash. But like these are extreme cases. But what's important for the day-to-day, like why your tongue activation is important, is because your tongue will make sure that gravity doesn't pull you down. So if let's say your head is forward from just terrible habits, your tongue won't be able to push anything up, and gravity is going to pull what the tongue can't support down, and that's just going to basically make you age so much faster than need it to be. And also you're just getting, and there's also other massive disadvantages. For example, your tongue pushes up your maxilla and opens your palate and widens your palate, opens your airway. All of this contributes to a higher intake of oxygen, which I'll explain why it's important in a second. So when the ability to exert force onto an object requires an entire chain-like response from the body, and to rely on a single or very few muscles to exert force it's gonna result in injury, and that's a massive reason why there's a lot of sports injuries. People still prioritize major muscles, which is exactly the opposite of what we should do, because they're major already, and in fact you probably overuse them because of the lifestyle that you live. We don't really require the massive the reactionary effect that comes from a chain-like response. So we don't rely on all the entirety of our muscles being activated. And so what are these chains? Well, for example, in extension, you have your ankle extensors, like your calves and your soleus. You have your femur, the muscles on your femur that extend, like your which are your leg. That's like everything that has to do with your quad, and then your the glutes, like glute maximus, glute medius, glute minimus, and then so that running down your leg extends, and that's also your lower back, and everything, your thoracic, the muscles in your thoracic spine, and your neck extensors. Now, flexors, the chain for flexion, is your tibialis muscle, which will flex your ankle. Everything that's involved in dorsiflexion, basically. Flexion for the knee, it happens in the knee with your hamstring. And then, and usually that's very weak for lots of people. And then the hip flexor is extremely weak for most people. And that's going to be flexion in the front of the hips, because your glutes are extensors for the back of your hips. So the hip flexors, usually they're very weak because we've completely shortened them while sitting down. And then since your lower back is your extensors, is an extensor muscle, your abs, whatever, abdominals are your flexors. And that's why it's not really a good idea to just do sit-ups if your lower back is weak, or just do deadlifts if your core is weak. It all works together, and in your arms, your triceps are your extensors, your biceps are your flexors, and the same thing happens in your wrists and forearms, and even up to your fingers, and your neck flex, and then there's your neck flexors, and yeah, and it's important that these work together. That's the key point here. That's how they were built. That's how they were made. That's how the structure of your body was made. And that's why some sports may have a negative effect on you. So what was I going to get back to? Oh yes. So your tongue pushes up your maxilla as well. So when it pushes it up, it gives you the ability to breathe in more air. So, okay, here's another point also. So I mentioned that posture isn't as superficial as many make it out to be. Many people think that you just kind of contort your body to match an ideal posture. But posture isn't that. Your posture is your resting position. And what that is basically when you just completely relax, or at least just neutral, you'll see basically what your body has molded itself to. So certain muscles lengthen, shorten, and even your bones can be affected by what you do on a daily basis. So what you do on a daily basis the outcome of your posture currently is the result of what you do on a daily basis. And your body just basically is trying to make sure it can. Your body has developed to suit the positions you are in on a daily basis. That's what I was trying to say. And so that's what I mean by posture isn't very superficial. You want the activities you do on a day-to-day basis to correctly follow our nature, and and our nature is determined by what our body structure is, and you can determine the function by that. And everything is connected. It's obvious. That's the structure of our body. Everything is connected, and it's important that when we use our body, we use it in a connective way. So, oxygen intake. This is a very key point for Graypill. The more oxygen we take in per breath, the less energy we use while breathing. The less energy we use is required for breathing. So, how do we save energy? Well, we take in more oxygen. That way we don't need to breathe more. That way we don't waste energy. Of all physiological processes, breathing requires the most energy. So of all physiological processes. That's very important. That shows a lot about the structure of our body and its morphology and physiology. So it has a massive impact on our performance in all aspects of life. The more oxygen you take in per breath, the less energy used, and the more oxygen gets to your brain. That's very important. So if you ever notice your thoughts are slow, or your athletic capabilities are not very good, this may be a factor. The more oxygen in your brain, the better your brain functions. So if you can breathe in and give yourself more oxygen, not only is your brain going to work faster, better, but you also have more energy because you won't be using it to get in more oxygen. So it almost exponentially makes your life better, and the speed at which you can process something will be significantly increase, and your thoughts will be faster when you're communicating. So you'll communicate a lot better. The more oxygen you breathe in, the more oxygen for your muscles. So obviously, athletic capabilities are extremely dependent on this factor. The faster you'll be, the stronger you'll be, the faster you'll recover. And the more you can do in a day compared to the person next to you. So the more money you can make, the more connections you can make with people, the more things you can do, the more experiences you can have before you die. So here's another topic I want to talk about, the speed and strength spectrum. So massive. This is why I was talking about some sports having negative impacts while others not having as many negative impacts. Massive underlooked or underrated thing mentioned is speed, and it's how important it is for our body to go through this to train speed. So this is the speed and strength spectrum. So maximal strength is over here, and speed is absolute speed is over here. And power is in the middle. So what are these? Well, our morphology allows us to go through these, to exert forces in these ways. So we can exert maximal force onto an object to move it through space, or we can exert maximal force to move our body in space as fast as possible. So speed is temporal and strength is spatial. Well, at least they're both temporal and spatial, but speed prioritizes temporal qualities and strength prioritizes the spatial. You're moving something in space. Doesn't matter how long it takes. That's what you're doing. You're moving something in space as much as because then this is why it's important. Because here's the thing: gravity is basically our biggest enemy for aging and deteriorating and becoming ugly or deforming, or can even, like I said, bring down your maxilla and make you slower and dumber. So you want to be as strong as possible against gravity. And your tongue is connected to the entire chain that is used for strength, speed, and power. And so everything is connected, and you want everything to be at its elite level so that you never deteriorate and that you never deform and that you can pursue any endeavor you want to. So in maximal strength, when you exert maximal force, you want your entire spine to be protected. You want your tongue and your neck flexors and everything to be activated, and you want your entire either posterior or anterior chain being used. I'll give you an example of what uses both the anterior chain and posterior chain in the most correct way, balanced and correct way. When you're training speed, you want to be moving as fast as possible so in time. This is also heavily reliant on your tendons, specifically if you're running your Achilles tendon, and how elastic it is. The more elastic your tendons are, the safer it is for you to jump. The safer it is for you to jump, the more you can jump, the higher you can jump. The higher you can jump, the longer you will be able to jump for, because if you can jump and not ever have a negative impact from the jumping because your Achilles are so strong, then you'll be able to jump for a very long time. Being able to jump for a very long time essentially gives you, anti-aging benefits everywhere. If you can jump for longer than the person next to you, let's say you're 60 years old and you can still jump, you'll live probably longer. The growth hormone that happens from just jumping on one leg is indicative of that. So what is power? Power is moving something, an object. So it's grabbing something from strength and grabbing something from speed because you're moving an object in space as fast as possible. In strength, it doesn't matter how long it takes as long as you move the object. In speed, you're not moving any external object. Well, yeah, you're not moving any external object. You're moving yourself as fast as possible in space. How fast you can move. So reactive speed, and it's very reactive, yeah. And it's important that you have fast reaction time. In strength, it's important that you have a very strong nervous system, central nervous system, and then in power, you're moving an object or space as fast as possible. So it's important to train them all, or at least focus on all of them, and really study how they can influence your life. And because the human body was meant to go through meant to feel each one of these and go through it and experience it. And they each will have massive hormonal benefits and massive growth hormone and sleep benefits and energy benefits. You'll notice that, after jumping, growing your Achilles and jumping a lot, you'll notice a lot of benefits. It's very important that we constantly fight against gravity and that we're able to move through gravity it has an extremely low impact on our life. The less impact gravity has on our life, the less it will deteriorate us. So yeah, all points on this spectrum are important. Something that can fulfill, which is what I was mentioned before, something that can fulfill all speed while also training the anterior chain and posterior chain is sprinting. You use all your flexion muscles, the front of your shin, the tibialis, your hip flexor, your hamstring, your core to stabilize, to pull your leg up for the driving down process of sprinting, which when you drive down, you use all of your extensors. And then you use your Achilles tendon, to the elasticity of it, to bounce, and you apply that pressure horizontally to move through space. And sprinting also is exerting force. You're exerting maximal force, therefore it's going to have massive hormonal benefits, and it's just going to have your posture is going to drastically change, and the way your arms move when you sprint gives you full range of motion and will help your rotator cuff and the muscles in the back. You have to really look into the technique of sprinting to do it correctly, otherwise it's very dangerous, and it's not something you do very frequently. It has a very low frequency. And so you have to really study it to do it correctly, and it's definitely something that has many anti-aging properties and isn't recommended and isn't suggested to anyone at all unless you compete in track and field, which is very odd to me because it's one of the least. It doesn't require any financial cost. It takes the least amount of time. It's honestly the freest way, the least expensive way to basically give yourself anti-aging benefits. So yeah, not really sure why it's not popular, but yeah, definitely should be popular. Some extra things I wanted to mention that were blue-pilled in is sleep. Ironically, blue light is terrible for our sleep. I was looking into getting some red light sunglasses because I'm on my computer doing homework very late at night. But yeah, you're basically tricking your brain into thinking to wake your brain up for the day. The blue light is completely stops melatonin production, and yeah, it's not going to give you good sleep. It's not going to let you have the benefits of sleep, especially early sleep from 10 to 2, which is very important, and I'll discuss another time. Yeah, so you can change your environment for that. That's massive, and when you get good sleep, you'll notice that your life is just ultimately better, and that everything because sleep is part of our nature. It's obvious. I mean, we require it's 1/3 of our life, and that's extremely important. And that's just something that we just completely overlook, and we don't really mention sleep hygiene as something that's critical for overall development. Sunlight also very underrated, and it's not really something we recommend as a health factor. I mean, I suppose some people say go outside, but the amount of sunlight you need is immense. Like, it's the vitamin D deficiency is low in people who spend all day outside. Vitamin D levels are low in people who spend all day outside. So I don't know. Maybe that I supplement in it when I supplement in vitamin D when I think I need it. I don't think supplements are the best thing in the world. And nutrition, things like DHT, is extremely underrated for our brain health. Yeah, I'm going to make another thing on that. If you don't want your brain to deteriorate, you have to eat DHT, food with DHT in it. Things like vitamin K2, vitamin E, magnesium, and zinc, not very prioritized, and we tend to just think the supplements will be sufficient for them.